It's almost been 2 years since I've built a PC, and usually I try to aim to do 1 to 2 every single year. But I need a new PC in the studio for productivity, video editing, stuff like that. But I also wanted to be able to game. And I finally get to build it in one of my favorite cases, the Fractal North XL case. I know this has been out for a while, but I love this case. Like, this case is so clean in the front. It just looks like it belongs in a living room. But at the same time, you can opt for like the glass panel and still showcase your RGB. And that's kind of the place I'm at right now. I don't want it to be a fishbowl with glass everywhere and RGB just going all over the place. I want a little bit of both. I want some fun, but I also want it to look clean. Plus, this case is just so easy to work with. There's tons of space. It has great thermal performance. It has a gorgeous design. The price is fair. It's not the quietest case in the Fractal lineup. They definitely have quieter cases, but the Arrow Lake CPU I'm using inside of here will make up for that, which I'll talk about shortly. Now, obviously the CPU is the Intel Core Ultra 9 285K, and I know it hasn't gotten the best reviews, and quite frankly, it's really hard to buy one right now anyways. The supply is just not there. But I happen to have one, and the Arrow Lake Core Ultra 9 is actually really good for productivity, good for video creators, good for any sort of demanding CPU related work. But the big reason why I want to use this CPU over, let's say, another 14900K is the power efficiency. The power efficiency does make a big difference in terms of how much it's pushing the CPU to its full capability. Yes, it can still go up to 250 watts, but most of the time it's not, and this is probably one of the quietest systems I've ever built so far. As for the RAM, I'm using the Team Group T-Force Extreme DDR5 RAM. This is 48GB kit. I'm waiting for another 48GB kit to come back in stock so I can increase it to 96, so 48 for now. But this is 8200 megahertz RAM CL38. It's very expensive, and I feel like I'm not getting the full performance right now from this Arrow Lake CPU using this style of memory. I'd probably save a little bit of money if you're building a PC today, but I tend to keep my PCs for a very long time and never upgrade them, so I'd rather spend the money now and kind of future-proof myself a little bit later. I also like the fact that it's just a simple and clean black color. I'm trying to keep the components inside fairly clean. Like, I don't want any funky colors. I just want it to be like black, silver, or a little bit of white. Now, the rest of the components are all from ASUS, and this is not sponsored by them whatsoever. They were kind enough to send me some of the stuff out and other things I picked up myself. But the idea was to keep the same manufacturer. So when I do all the RGB, it ties in nicely under one piece of software, and it's just a lot easier to work with. Now, the motherboard is the ASUS ROG Maximus Z890 Hero. It does have 3 PCIe 5.0 M2 slots. I'm filling them up, or at least 2 of them right away. And I like the fact that it comes with a 5 gigabit Ethernet port and a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port. There's Wi-Fi 7 connectors if you plan on buying a Wi-Fi 7 router in the future. It has excellent built-in SSD cooling, but I'm really loving these quick release mechanisms. Like, it's just so much easier to install these drives now than having to screw things in. Like, I know, again, it's been out for a while, but it's the first time I'm experiencing it in this build. As for the cooler, I just had to go with the ASUS ROG Ryujin 3 360 AIO, and this is one of the craziest coolers. Not only is it using very quiet Noctua IPPC PWM radiator fans, but the fans themselves are magnetic. They don't have cables. Like, you just click them together, and then on the last fan, you run the cable to plug in to the motherboard so you get power and RGB. It's just a lot easier to work with. Now, the one thing I love about the ASUS Ryujin is the fact that they have another built-in fan inside of the block over here that helps keep the VRMs cool, okay? And because it's a 360 AIO and the fact that Arrow Lake doesn't get as hot as the previous Raptor Lake CPUs, this is a significantly quieter system. Now, the storage comes from Corsair. I'm using the Corsair MP700 Elite. These are some of the more affordable PCIe 5.0 drives out there. And the best part about these drives is they're ridiculously fast. And because the Hero motherboard has built-in cooling for these drives, they run very, very cool. For example, I'm getting speeds of about 10,000 read and about 8,000 write. They're about 2 terabytes, and I have 2 of them inside of this computer, so I'll have about 4 terabytes of storage The main drive will obviously be for the operating system and system files, and then the second drive will be for games and other things that I don't want to mesh with the operating system. Now this PSU is obviously more than powerful enough for the Asus ROG Strix RTX 4080 Super OC Edition that I have inside of here. This thing is absolutely massive. Like, you can't use this GPU for a small form factor build. You need a big PC case like this because it basically spans the entire case. I like this GPU because it's overclockable. It has 60 gigabytes of VRAM. It has a nice, massive, but quiet vapor chamber cooler. Now, as you can see, cable management is pretty good in this PC build. There's a couple of cables back here where I can wrap up nicely. The only thing I'd probably add is a fan on the back. This case for some reason did not come with a back fan, so I'm probably just going to put a simple fan back here to keep the airflow coming from the front and then of course being passed through the back. It really hasn't affected performance or thermal so far, so it's not really a rush. As for the cables, I looked into cable mods. I didn't have time to get them to come in, but I went on Amazon and saw a company called LinkUp and bought some cables from them. I went with a silver color. I wanted a brown color to kind of match the front of the case, but the brown they have on their website looks way too orange, so I had to not use them. So instead I went with silver because a lot of the components from Asus do have silver accents, and it adds a little bit of pizzazz to the overall case. Now this entire system costs around $4,200 US, so it's not the most expensive PC I've ever built, but it's definitely still real expensive. And obviously, if you want to save a few bucks on this, there are some things you can change to reduce the price point, but still get very similar performance. Overall, the performance has been great when it comes to productivity. I mostly edit in DaVinci Resolve, and this is an absolute beast when it comes to editing video in DaVinci Resolve. If you're using this for any sort of creative work, regardless of whether it's Photoshop, Premiere Pro, this is going to be able to handle it just fine. Single core clock speeds are not the fastest I've seen. That definitely goes to the MacBook Pro 16 with M4 Max, but the multi-core speeds are definitely really fast, like over 2,500, which is quite impressive. Now, obviously, this doesn't translate into better performance when it comes to gaming, and quite frankly, I don't game at 1080p. I game at QHD or 4K, mostly at 4K, and the 4080 Super and the CPU is more than capable of handling that. In fact, most CPUs don't even need to be the fastest in order to handle 4K. That just gets pushed to the GPU anyway, so it really doesn't make a difference. I'm more concerned about productivity, and this Arrow Lake CPU does that. Now, if you are interested in gaming, this can obviously handle 4K games. I played Overwatch on this at 4K. You're gonna get over 200 frames per second without any issues with settings set to Ultra or Epic. If you're playing Wukong, I suggest putting on DLSS. That game is very demanding. I'm able to get about 90 frames per second using DLSS with this RTX 4080 Super. Cyberpunk, you can handle it with DLSS off around 40 to 50 frames per second, but obviously if you turn it on, you'll have a much better experience overall. And the last game I tested was Path of Exile 2. I'm playing the early access. I love this game. It is so good. It's what Diablo 4 I feel should have been. It has everything you'd want in an action ARPG. Look, I was only getting 72 frames per second, which is not extraordinary. I feel like the game has good graphics, but not that demanding where the FPS was that low. Again, I did have everything cranked up. I'm sure if I tweaked a few things, I could get the FPS higher, but quite frankly, as long as you're 60 FPS for this style of game, it feels absolutely smooth. Like, this is not an FPS like Overwatch or CSGO where you want the frames to be as high as possible. Oh, I should also mention, I had one little defect with this 360 IO. Not a big deal, but something that I noticed. You see these little rubber pads? They stick inside here, right? And they keep coming out every once in a while, and I find myself having to push them in so they don't stick out all over the place. I don't know why it does that, but it is kind of annoying. Either way, that's my 2024 PC build. Of course, I'll be making changes in the near future when the 50 series comes out, but if you're interested in any of the parts, I'll place links in the description down below. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'm always here to answer them. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.